Good morning. Good morning. My name is Valerie Leonard. I'm the founder of nonprofit Utopia, and we are the ideal community for folks who want to start their organizations, nonprofit, want to manage them, or scale them. If you were with us last week, we talked about developing your value proposition. And this is language that's typically used for investors and entrepreneurs, but I feel that that language is very, very relevant for those of us who want to start, manage, and scale nonprofits. So we're kind of going back and forth between the language of traditional for profit investors as well as nonprofit investors. Remember, nonprofits are businesses, and we need to make sure that we add value to whomever we're serving, whether that is for the funder, whether it's for our clients, whether it's for our partners. Today, we are going to reach back and we're going to give I guess, like an overview, not so much dwelling on everything that we talked about, but we're going to give an overview of what we covered last week, as well as talk about program logic models and how you can use that information to develop your business model. All right. So, without further ado, I am going to share my screen. Feel free to leave comments and questions. Let us know who you are, where you're from, any experience that you've had developing business models, either for a for profit business or nonprofit business. If you are an investor, feel free to give us some insights as to what you have found, either for nonprofits or in your dealings with for profits. All of that information and feedback is indeed valuable. Alrighty, so if you can just hold on a moment, I'm going to share my screen and then we will get into it. Okay, so as I said before, we're going to be talking about using our logic models to create effective nonprofit business models. All right, so we're going to pull everything together. All too often, we find that the nonprofits are operating in their separate silos, they have their separate jargon as opposed to the for profit entrepreneurs. This presentation will show you how you can bring all of that together and create yet a better product for everybody who is concerned. So, by way of review, we're going to talk about what our working definition of the unique value proposition is. Remember, we used the definition that was created by Osterwalder, Pinure, and Bernarder and Alan Smith. All right, so they define a unique value proposition as a bundle of products, services, and programs that create value for a customer segment. And simply put, this is basically a set of benefits. What's in it for the people that you serve? And remember, not every customer segment is going to have the same value. They're not going to derive the same benefits. So you're going to have to do this exercise for each of the segments that you serve. So if you are a nonprofit, you probably need to do this value proposition for funders, for the people that you serve, and even the people that you serve, they might be in different types of programs. So if you serve youth as well as seniors, you're going to need to do this for your youth program and your senior program. All right. So, a value proposition is a promise of the value to be delivered, communicated, and acknowledged. It's also a belief from the customer about how you're going to deliver it. So, what benefit are they going to get, and how are they going to experience it? Because you can derive the same benefit, but if they're expecting you to deliver something in one form and you give it in another form, it may not be as valuable to them because you have not met their expectations. All right. So when we're communicating our value, there's an expectation set, right, about what we're going to deliver and how, and we need to make sure that we follow up, all right, or follow through on that. All right, so a value proposition, there are three components. One, it's relevant to the customer segment that you're serving. Two, it has quantified value. And three, it shows how you're different. And that difference needs to be unique to your specific organization, your specific business. So these same concepts that we're speaking of, they can be used in the for-profit business realm as well as nonprofit. All right. So at this point, we're borrowing from the entrepreneurs. So when we speak about relevancy, it's going to make sure that you have a clear statement that explains how your product solves the problems that your customers have, how it's going to improve their situation. Your value proposition is going to communicate value. So when you're talking about value, we're talking about the specific benefits, right? And then how are you different? What's the differentiation? What makes you different from everybody else who's serving nonprofits? Remember, there are over 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States. So what makes you different? What makes the way you deliver the service different. So you want to tell the ideal customer why they should buy from you, why they should spend time with you, with your services, and not the competition. All right. So a value proposition is not, and this is where many people struggle, is not a list of things that we do. So when people talk about what your value is, we should not go into a list of things that we do. We should not focus primarily on the features of our products, programs, and services, right? The bells and whistles. I can assure you that people don't work with us because of the bells and whistles. It's all about the value. So it's not about what we do, it's not about the features, even though the features can be important, but that's really not what is communicating the value. All right. So we need to be empathetic, right? We need to step into our customers' shoes. And we need to, again, for every customer segment that we have. So if we're serving youth, the youth program participants, the ex offenders, those participants, our board members, our employees, our funders, step into our customers' shoes, right? Identify their jobs. And when we're talking about their jobs, we're talking about what they're going through on a day to day basis, right? In order to achieve certain goals and objectives, right? So in some cases, that can actually be a real job that people are going to. In other cases, it could be their quality of life. So our job, right, is to identify what a day in a life of who we're trying to serve is. We need to understand what their pains are. What are some of the barriers they're going through that will keep them from doing what it is they set out to do. And then we also need to identify their gains, right? What is it that they want to do? What are their goals? What are their objectives? And then, based on what they're going through, what their goals and objectives are, what their pains are, and what our capacity is, we need to identify those jobs, those areas in their day in a life, right, that we can impact positively. We need to prioritize the pains that we can help alleviate and prioritize the gains that we can help them achieve within our own capacity and the things that we like to do. All right. So remember that just because something is good for a customer segment, just because they need it, does not mean it has value, right? Value is not achieved unless you have a set of customer needs, right, that are matched with what you're able to give, right? So we need to identify what the customer is going through on a day to day basis. Look at what they're trying to achieve in terms of gains. Look at their goals and objectives. And then we need to think about the pains, look at the barriers to reaching those goals and objectives. And then, in a very generic sense, and this is before we give our 2 cents worth, right? What is it that we can do, or what is it in the marketplace, or, that will help people to achieve those goals? What is it in the marketplace, or what activity is there that we know can alleviate their pain? And then once we know that, then we begin to incorporate attributes that will help them achieve their goals, attributes that will help them relieve their pain. And then we deliver products and services that will do all of that plus make their lives easier. Once you do that, that's where you begin to achieve value. And again, the same type of value that your customer get is going to vary. So your youth will get a different value from the program than seniors or from your organization, and they'll get a different value than a funder or a board member. All right, so remember to communicate with each of those in a way that connotes value to them, right? So there is a formula, and for writing a value proposition. And here it is. Our blank products and services help whatever customer segment you're speaking to who want to, whatever job they're going through, right? It could be a day in their life, it could be their actual job. So we want to do this how? So we're going to do it by reducing something, helping them to avoid something, or we're going to help them increase something, right? And then this could be unlike a competing value proposition. You don't necessarily have to name who the competition is, but you can talk about the solution that they have and how that solution is lacking. That's why you're in the market to do what you want to do. All right. So here's an example. There's a book, The Value Proposition Design. And the way this book came about is the authors, Oscar Wilder et al., they actually tested this concept before writing the book. They looked at who some of their key clients could be. This would be people in the consulting world, the business world, who are focusing on strategy, looking at the things that they wanted to achieve in their particular jobs, how they wanted to be perceived by their bosses, by their clients, looked at the gains they wanted to, what goals they had, looked at the pains that they had, and then looked at ways or looked at attributes in the marketplace that could actually help them reach their goals of wanting to look good, wanted to minimize their pains. Some of the pains they had were things were too theoretical, right? Things would take too long to actually determine whether or not they would work in the marketplace, right? So those are some of the things that they were thinking about. And in so doing, they developed a whole list of products and services that they could provide in order to make lives easier for those people who were dealing in strategy. All right. So one of the ways was to come up with this book, right? So the value proposition for this book is our book helps business professionals who want to improve or build business by avoiding making stuff nobody wants and making clear the indicators to measure success. All right. So for us, we're not a nonprofit. Our value proposition is, especially for our program, the Capacity Building Blocks program, is the nonprofit Utopia Capacity Building Blocks program. It helps nonprofit professionals build sustainable organizations by increasing their confidence to lead, accelerating their learning curve, and increasing their fundraising potential. And you can do the same thing. If you're a member of the nonprofit Utopia community, we have worksheets where you can go and fill in the blanks for yourself, right? All right, so we're going to step away just for a moment from the for profit approach, right? And we're going to come back to what you are familiar with as nonprofits. and that is a program logic model. So for those of you who are not familiar with the program logic model, is basically a diagram that shows, the current environment or situation within your program operates, your major goals and objectives, the resources that are required to operate the program, the activities that are required to meet the goals. It's a desired change um, that managers hope to achieve as a result of implementing the program. So, as a direct result of the activities in which you're engaged, you're going to be able to measure some kind of change. And there are many, many variations. So, for as many people as there are on Earth, all of us can come up with a different way of approaching a problem in the community. It could be just as simple as saying inputs, outputs, and outcomes, the things that go into making a program, the things that you're going to produce, or the activities in which you're engaged to create this amount of change. But they all, no matter how complicated they are, try to achieve those three things. I like to use this program logic model. This is based on the University of Wisconsin Extension program, where they focus on first looking at the environment, right? Look at what some of the issues are. And then, based on what the issues are in your community, in your environment, right? Then you identify a specific target, or you might begin to segment um, the market according to various targets. But regardless, you're going to create a separate set of goals and objectives. And remember, the goals are broad, sweeping statement about what it is you want to change based on what you see in the environment. And the objectives are going to tell you how you're going to meet those goals. So we start off with the situation analysis, right? Again, and you get the goals and objectives, and then you feed back into looking at what can happen on the macro level. So big picture, what's happening nationally? Some of us are working globally. What's happening. Your big picture might be what's going on with the state. Your big picture might be what's going on with the city, right? So what's happening at the big picture level? What policies, what laws are going to impact your ability to reach your goals and objectives, right? And then at the local level, what's happening in the community? What's happening with your clients? What's happening with your organization that's going to impact your ability to reach those goals and objectives? And even it's going to impact the how you do it, because it's all about capacity and leadership, right? So once you understand the goals and objectives and the situation, right, then you think about the inputs, right? And another way of looking at inputs is looking at resources. And we do have a free guide that you can download. It's called Resource Mapping on Steroids, where you can actually look at your mission, vision, and core values and all of your programs, and then identify what resources you have on hand, what resources you need to get in order to implement those programs and services and meet your goals and objectives. So in this case, you can use all of that information to help you with this program logic model. So what we invest. So when we look at investment, those are the things that we already have on hand, the resources, the raw materials that we have on hand that will help us to reach the goals and objectives. So we might have a little bit of cash on hand. We may have some staff time. We may have equipment. We may have supplies. We may have volunteers, right? And then just because we have them doesn't mean that that's enough, right? So, based on what we have and based on what we need, there could be a gap between what we have and what we need in order to meet our goals and objectives. What is it that we still need to get? So we need to go and acquire something, right? So we might have to go out and hire additional staff. We might have to recruit additional volunteers. We might have to hire people who are experts. So that might mean getting a consultant. It might mean hiring somebody who has the skills that nobody else on staff has. It might mean getting the training for the people on our board, on our staff, so that internally we can increase our capacity so that we do this ourselves. All right, so those are the inputs, those are the resources. I'm trying to go back and forth between the for profit language and then other language you may have heard in nonprofit, so that when we get to our business model, you'll be able to see how this relates to the business model. All right. So now that we know what's going on around us, we have our goals and objectives, we know what resources we need, who is our target market, right? And again, we may have to segment the market. It may be we're providing um, health and wellness programs, but we might divide the market into, say, youth versus seniors, right? So, what target markets do we serve? And then once we do that, we need to figure out what activities we're going to engage in. So, what programs, what services, and what activities. And then, most importantly, we look at the outcomes, right? So, the programs and services and the activities, those are the outputs, right, that we're churning out, but we're doing all of this activity to what end? So, what is going to change as a direct result of all of this activity? If we're just engaged in activity and nothing happens as a result, either we have an ineffective program, or we have ineffective ways of communicating change, or we have ineffective ways to collect the data so that we can prove that we made a difference. That's just an aside, right? So, how are people going to be changed as a direct result of the activities in which we're engaged as a business, as a nonprofit? What's going to happen in the short term? What's going to happen in the intermediate term? What's going to happen in the long term, right? All of this stuff together helps us to evaluate whether or not what we're doing is working, right? So we need to have ongoing evaluation and using those lessons that we learn to pour back into our program so that there's continuous improvement. So that's what we would do as a nonprofit. And here is just a sample, and I'm not going to read all of this, but here is an example of that program logic model. Again, this is not the only way. This is just one of the ways. But remember, every program logic model has some way of communicating inputs or activities, has, inputs or the resources, the raw materials, outputs or activities, outcomes, what has changed. So that's the core of every logic model that you have done. All right, so this is a sample program logic model for the Second Chance Act. And the Second Chance Act is legislation that came about under President Bush to actually help ex-offenders to better reintegrate into society. So it's an evidence-based model. They looked at the research, right? They looked at the things that work to mitigate the chances of them going back to prison. And this whole model is based on um, strategies that we know that work. All right. So what's going on in the environment? So at the time that the Second Chance Act came about, there were over 650,000 inmates that were released every year in the United States, and they have to go back to their families and communities. And without intervention, that means if nothing happens, right, left to their own devices, almost half of them will go back to prison within 5 years, 40%. And at the time this was created, 18,377 inmates were released to the Cook County, right, in 2001. and 84% of them came back to Chicago. And we know that the second chance law was passed in 2008. So, given what's going on in the situation, what are our goals and objectives? Our overarching goal is to reduce the rate of recidivism, or the rate at which people return to prison, among clients in our program, so in our Second Chance Act funded program, by half over the next 5 years. So remember, we only want to focus on people over which we have some influence. A mistake that a lot of people make is to create goals and objectives that impact the whole community, and they don't have control or influence over the whole community. So you just want to focus on the people that will take advantage of your services. So we look at the inputs, which are the raw materials. We need to hire a case manager. We need to recruit and train mentors. We need to hire a Vista volunteer. We need to buy software to track outcomes. We need professional development opportunities for our staff. We need to have pre-release orientation and learning opportunities for the ex-prisoners who are going to come into our program. And then we're going to be providing matching funds and in-kind donations up to 50%. So the outputs, what activities are we going to be engaged in? First of all, we're going to target nonviolent offenders who are 18 years old and older that have been released within the past 6 months, right? We're going to provide case management and mentoring, because those are evidence-based practices. We're going to provide job training and placement programs. Again, that's another evidence-based practice, so we want to make sure that we have that in our program. And then we're going to make referrals to supportive services. Again, that's another evidence-based practice that is shown to work. People who are returning from prisoners, they tend to go back if they don't have jobs, if they don't have mentors, if they don't have housing or other supportive services that will help them integrate. So, again, the outcomes, what's going to happen as a direct result of all of this activity that we're engaging in? The first outcome is clients are going to get meaningful employment. So, we're going to know that we're making strides by looking at the numbers of clients that we have who actually get jobs. Another outcome is clients establish a consistent work history. So what's going to be the data that we collect, or what's going to be the indicator that they have a consistent work history? We're going to be collecting data that tell us the number of clients who remain employed. People who remain employed after 30 days, 60, 90 days, right? Another outcome is clients are going to earn living wages. That is, wages that will help them support themselves and their family. And an indicator that they earn living wages is actually look at their average earnings and see if they match up with market rate wages. Another outcome is public safety, increased public safety. An indicator of increased public safety is reducing the number of people who will most likely engage in crime again. So you can look at the rates of recidivism among your program participants. Ideally, you're going to have 0% of people going back, right? That's your ideal. Doesn't always happen, because life happens, but that is your goal. So, how are we going to evaluate this? We're going to be asking our questions in the planning process. You don't wait until after you implement the program to think about how you're going to evaluate it. So, very early on, as you're planning the program, you're going to ask yourself, what's the power of the mentoring model to actually reduce recidivism? And think about the data you're going to collect. What does it look like to have a successful mentoring program? What's the evidence that it's successful? What's the data behind it? So we're going to utilize data from our intake process and other program documents to conduct ongoing program assessments and quality improvement. And then we're going to hire an outside evaluator, somebody who can be objective, right? And they're going to provide an evidence-based program evaluation, meaning they're going to look at what it is that you said that you would do and how you said you would do it. And they're going to look at the data and determine, and this is data that you have been collecting to determine whether or not you were successful. And then you will take that information and you will put it back into program design. That's going to help you to increase the quality of the program. It's going to help you to increase the types of outcomes, help you expand your reach. Why? Because, if you have a solid program, that's naturally going to attract more funding. It's going to attract more qualified employees. It's going to attract more partners. It's going to attract higher quality board members. So success begets other success. All right. So we talked about the value proposition. We talked about your program logic model. And now we're going to talk about a business model, right? So the business model actually builds upon your value proposition. But since we're focusing on nonprofits, and that's not to say that for profit businesses can't benefit from anything that I've said, because clearly we're using business methods, but I want to build upon all of that and show you how everything is related. So, again, we're going to start with the common definition. And a common definition that we're using for business model is it's a description of the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. Remember, it doesn't matter how good your product is in terms of functionality. It doesn't matter how many bells and whistles it has. It doesn't matter how much your clients need your programs, how useful they are. You have not created value until you have created a situation where people are willing to spend time or money or some other resource. It could be even political and social capital on your programs. All right. That's where we know that value is created. All right, so here are the 9 building blocks to developing your business model. You're going to first look at your customer segments, and then you will look at the value propositions that you're providing to each one of those segments. So, again, you're going to have a value proposition for funders, a value proposition for clients and the people that use your services, a value proposition for your employees if your goal is to use the value proposition to attract and retain employees. Channels, that could be how people know about you, how you're going to sell your programs and services and products. You'll think about your customer relationships, your revenue streams, your key resources. Again, you see the overlap between segments, key resources, overlap between the program logic model and the business model. Key activities, that's another overlap. And then key partnerships is another overlap. And then cost structure, even though we don't talk about the cost structure in the logic model, if you want to develop an accurate budget, it's really important to look at the cost of all of those activities and resources that you have outlined in your logic model. All right, so building block number 1, customer segments. So those are basically the groups of people that you are looking to serve. So it could get, again, your clients, your board members, your employees, funders, partners, people in the community. Each one is going to derive value from the activities that you do in a different way. All right. So some of the guiding questions for approaching the marketplace, you got to think about, who are we creating value for, right? And again, different segments are going to derive value in different ways. who are our most important customers. Remember, you can't be all things to all people. God knows I try and I get frustrated every time. So we have to be very specific because remember, you want to have a very clear message in the marketplace. You want people to position you and associate you with certain things, and then you want those things that they associate you with to be positive, right? That's part of your brand. And it also needs to be something that you can deliver within your own capacity, and if not within your own capacity, by partnering with other people. All right, so building block 2, value propositions. And remember, your value propositions, this is going to be the center of your business model. This is where everything else, emanates from, right? So you want to think about the bundle of products and services that create value for a specific customer segment, taking into account the following questions. What value do we deliver to the customer? Which of our customers' problems are we helping to solve, right? And again, we can't be all things even to that one customer. We need to, stay in our lanes and focus on those places that we're strong in. And remember, way back when, I showed you how to do an organizational capacity assessment. So you should use the results of those assessments to think about your strengths and weaknesses and how you can best serve your client. All right. So which customer needs are we satisfying? So is it their needs to improve their quality of life? Is it what goals are they trying to achieve? Do they have some pains that we're trying to alleviate? So, what bundles of products and services are we offering? Right? So, building block number 3, okay, they're channels. So, how do we communicate with people? So, we have distribution channels and we have communication channels. Distribution channels, those focus on how we're going to sell, how we're going to market to our client, and then the communication channels are how we're going to actually um, communicate our value, right? So we've got the communication channel, we got the distribution channel, and we've got the sales channel. So distribution is, again, getting our product out to specific places where the customer can eventually decide whether or not to buy. All right, so there are several guiding questions to help you decide where your channel is going to be. And remember, it's really important to make sure that the channel that you are using is actually a channel that is used by the people that you want to buy and sell your products or use your services, right? So, what channels do we want to reach people? How are we reaching folks now? Are those channels adequate? How are we going to integrate the channels, right? Which channels work best for us? Which channels do we actually need to get rid of? Are there some new channels that we haven't even thought about? When we look at how much it costs for us to use those channels, which ones are the most efficient in terms of cost? And then how are we integrating them, with other activities that we go through with our customers? All right, building block number 4, customer relationships, right? So what types of relationships do you want to have? How are you going to interact with your clients, with your, if in this case your customers are your employees or your board members or your funders. So think about how you're going to relate with them ongoing. Is it going to be face to face? Is it going to be more technology based? Is it going to be automated? And remember, the more human interaction, the higher your price that you can charge. The more hands-on personal treatment folks get, the higher your price can be. So we need to also look at, what our relationship is going to be during, the three different phases: customer acquisition or sales, right? Our customer retention, which is, how we're going to service people and keep, that ongoing relationship even after they buy. And then how do we use those relationships to help us to boost the sale, to upsell? So for nonprofits, that upselling could be, okay, we got a funder to give us funding for this program, right, at $50,000. How do we increase the ask? How do we ask for more money, right? The way you can get more money is to make sure you nurture that relationship after you've gotten that grant in the first place. You have to make sure that you are a wise steward. You have to make sure that you're keeping the channels of communication open, not only communicate the success, but communicate the challenges. So all of that goes into your customer retention strategy, right? So that when it comes time for you to expand the amount of money you're getting from that one customer, they will know, like, and trust you, right? So some of the guiding questions for your relationships, these are your ongoing customer relationships. So what type of relationships does each of our customers expect us to establish and maintain with them, right? So your grantors, the people that you are getting money from or the people that you are selling to, what is it that they expect, right? Um, what types of relationships have you already established? Are those relationships strong? If they're weak, how do you make them stronger? Even if they're strong, how do you make them stronger? How costly are these relationships? How much money is it costing you to start a new relationship, to maintain a relationship? So the money it might cost you to have special events, to have meetings, to produce reports, and how are these relationships integrated with the rest of the business model? So you don't want to have your relationships to be isolated from the rest of your business model. And we'll go through the rest of the business model. So building block number 5, revenue streams. So this is the cash that's coming in from every one of the activities, every one of the products and services from each one of your customer segments. So here's some examples of ways that you can generate revenue. You can sell assets. So you're selling ownership rights to a physical product, for example, car sales or merchandise, books, um, a usage fee. That could be a subscription. Um, Well, it's similar to a subscription. So it's based on the use of a particular service. So cell phone minutes, number of days in the hotel or hospital, and then a subscription, more and more of the services that we used to just pay for outright, like, our accounting. If you use QuickBooks, we used to be able to just buy that product and service outright through an asset sale. Now that has been converted to subscription fees, right? And then you, as nonprofit organizations, you can create a situation where you might create an a community of people that you serve, and you might charge a small subscription fee. Lending, renting, and leasing, those are fees that are created from, you could rent out a space that you have. And then licensing, you're giving customers permission to use your intellectual property for a fee, right? And it's usually for a limited time. So building block 6, key resources. So those are those resources that are necessary to produce value. And then from a nonprofit perspective, those resources are those things that you need in order to produce your programs and services, and most importantly, goals, objectives, and outcomes. So these resources could be physical, so they could be the buildings, they could be the equipment, they could be people, they could be our distribution networks. They could be intellectual assets, our copyrights, our trademarks, any proprietary knowledge that we have. If there's a specific way that we do things that's different from other people that can give you a competitive advantage, that is a resource. Your human resources, your employees, right? Your contractors, your partners, your board members, your volunteers, financial capital, cash, lines of credit, loans, mortgages. So when we look at the guiding questions regarding our resources, one of the first questions we have to ask is, what resources do we need to fulfill our value proposition? And that is deliver value to our customer segments. And then in the case of the program logic model, what resources do we need in order to meet our goals and objectives and our outcomes, our desired outcomes? What resources are necessary to access our distribution channel? So it's not just the matter of producing this program, right? We got to think about how we're going to conduct community outreach and marketing. And if you're a for profit, what resources are you going to need in order to tap into those distribution channels that are most likely going to help you reach your desired customer? What do we need in order to maintain our customer relationships? What resources do we need in order to generate revenue streams? And remember, for every one of these resources, you need to figure out how much that's going to cost you. All right. So, building block 9, the key activities. Those are the things that you're going to be doing in order to make the business model work. So, again, these are the activities that you're going to be engaging in order to make your programs work, in order to meet your goals, objectives, and your outcomes. All right. So, and so these are the things that are we're going to use to create value, right? So again, these models are going to vary based on your specific model. And then building block number 8, and notice I went a little bit out of order, your key partnerships, right? What strategic alliances? We can't do all this work ourselves, right? We may have to tap into other organizations in order for us to be more impactful, in order for us to reach the customers, in order to service them better, right? So these are strategic alliances with people who are not going to compete and undermine us, right? So you also want to look at co-opetition, or working with people who would normally be your competitors. Make sure that you have a firm understanding of how this is going to work. Make sure you get lawyers involved so nobody is ripping one off from the other. It could be joint ventures. And remember, a joint venture is different from a partnership. A partnership, and that's also different from, just, I guess, a collaboration where you have an MOU. The MOU is not a legally binding instrument, but it does lay out how you're going to work together. A partnership can be it could be a legal entity that's going to spell out the governance, as well as, it's going to talk about the duals, I'm sorry, the roles and responsibilities of each one. But a joint venture is creating a whole separate entity where it's almost like you could look at it as a corporation, and the board members consist of the people who are partners. All right. And then you also look at your buyer supplier relationships to make sure that you can provide your goods and services on a timely basis. All right. So when we look at the questions for identifying our key partners, the first thing we have to ask is, who are our key partners? What can they offer to complement us? What it is that they do? What is it that we do? How can we do something together that creates a triple win, that is a win for us, a win for them, and most importantly, a win for the people we're serving. Who are the people that are suppliers? You know, who do we need to buy from, buy our key resources from in order to make sure that we can deliver a program, service, or product or a value proposition? All those things we're using kind of interchangeably. And which key resources are we acquiring from our partners? So, who are we using as suppliers, and what suppliers are our partners using, and which key activities do our partners perform? And then, we need to look at what is actually motivating us, right? Why are we getting into this partnership? And then we look at the cost structure. All right, the cost structure describes all costs incurred to operate a business model. So for every one of those 8 blocks that we shared, you have to figure out a cost. There's even a cost of collecting money. So you need to count the cost, and those will become your cost structure. So one of the guiding questions are, what are the most important costs that are inherent in our business model? What are the key resources and how much do they cost, and which ones are most expensive, and which activities are most expensive? Because remember, we're doing this all on one page, even though you might, I guess, in a separate document go into detail. We're trying to keep all of this stuff in one page. That's why we're focusing on the most important ones. All right, so you take these 9 building blocks, and these become the basis of your business model canvas. So this is one form, and this is the most common form of the business model canvas, right? And again, this was created by Osterwalder et al., right? And you can have a business model. This is the most common one. You can have a more lean one where you're just focusing on a few of these, the most important. And then you can even do a business model canvas that is more mission driven. But I thought this would be a good model to use for those people who are in business, as well as those who are working for nonprofits, or you want to start one. So again, you notice that some of the language from the nonprofit we might see in this business model canvas. And you notice too that this business model canvas is a little bit more detailed than your program logic model. So if you could do the program logic model, do the value proposition canvas first, that will help you really, really get to the bottom of all the activities and all the resources that you need in order to develop an evidence based program that will also be market driven. So we're going to start at the center. The center is our value proposition. So for every one of those clients that, client segments, your board members, your clients that you serve, your funders, community partners. So for every one of those segments, what's in it for them? What's the value that your organization, your programs and services actually brings to them? So you start off there, right? And then you think about, again, who your customer segments are. And then you look at who your key partners are, the key activities within which you're going to be engaged. Remember that, you'll see key activities in your logic model as well. The key resources, you'll see that in your logic model. You look at the types of relationships that you want to have, with your customers. Are you going to relate with them just through the website? Will it be face to face? Will it be some combination thereof? Will it be through snail mail? Look at the distribution channels. That is how you're going to get the physical product into the market. And then you also look at the communication channels. And actually, you think about the communication channels first. How are you going to communicate this value? Will it be through newspapers? Will it be through social media? And once you get people to make a decision to buy, So your communication channel, think of that as part of your funnel, right? So how do you convert that to sales? Then you got to think about your distribution channel. How do you get that product into a position where your customer can actually take advantage of it? Is it through a store? Is it through a website? Is it by walking into your office and, completing some sort of assessment? Looking at your cost structure. Again, for every one of these boxes, key partners, how much is it going to cost to engage your partners, to recruit your partners, to keep them engaged? For every activity that you're going to engage in for this program, how much is that going to cost? Look at the resources that you'll need. How much are those resources going to cost? Right? If there's any associated cost with actually generating the value proposition, what is that cost? If there are any costs to maintaining and acquiring customer relationships, you want to count those costs. What are the costs for using those distribution channels, for using those communication channels? What are the costs, for identifying and reaching your customers? If there are any, beyond maintaining relationships, you want to be able to identify those, and then you want to summarize what those costs are in the cost structure. And then how are you going to cover the cost? Think about the revenue streams, right? So what revenue streams are you going to derive from these key activities, right? So what programs, what products, what services are you going to provide? How much money you're going to get from each one of those activities? All right, so here is an example. All right, this is Walkbug, right? So their value proposition, I'm going to start in the middle. The value proposition: Walkbug helps tourists new to the city and locals get to know the city that they're in. Walkbug helps hobbyists find great hidden places to practice their hobby. And then Walkbug helps institutions show people around their campus cheaply and efficiently. So some of their key partners are local businesses and tour operators. Some of the key activities they're going to engage in, they're going to create relationships with tour operators and institutions, and they're going to create tour communities. Some of the resources, they're going to use a tour app, both web and mobile, and community assets, so the social pages. All right. The customer relationships, they're going to research tool for tourists. They're going to create a research tool for tourists new to the city and local. So that is how they're going to maintain their relationships. They're going to have one-on-one partnerships with institutions. So the channels, the distribution channels and the communication channels, they have an app, so it'll be their website as well as mobile, um, personal sales calls, and then social. So they'll be promoting on Twitter and Facebook. So who are their customer segments? Tourists, hobbyists, people who are new to the city, people who are locals that don't take advantage of what their city has to offer, and institutions, for example, colleges, public parks, etc. All right, so the cost structure. So again, we need to look at all of our activities and who we're trying to reach, and then put a cost to it. So there's a cost to sales, there's a cost to production, and there's a cost for marketing, right? So the sales cost, so how much does it cost for us to conduct outreach to tour operators and institutions? And then production, how much does it cost to put that website together and maintain it? And same for the app, and how much does it cost for us to support an online community? The marketing cost. How much is it going to cost us to build a community around our app? right? So it could be an online community in Facebook, and just because Facebook is free doesn't mean that it's free to, conduct the outreach that you need to drive engagement in that community. All right, revenue streams. Where we're going to get our money. Okay, Walkbud has said that they're going to get money through white label subscriptions. That is, they're going to create an app that other folks can use and put their name on it, but they'll still generate some of that income. And they will also generate income from customizations for institutions. And they're also going to generate revenue streams through business advertising. All right, here is another example from Flickr from their photo sharing, right? So their key partners are Yahoo. Their key activities are platform management and selling. Their key resources are their Flickr platform and their brand. So notice their brand is one of those intangibles. Their value proposition to their customers is they have free basic photo sharing. And notice they are able to communicate value even though they're not generating direct revenue from their free customers. And they're using their free product to do an upsell, right? They're going to maintain relationships, but they're using their free customers to upsell to premium photo sharing, which has more features, right? They're going to have relationships, mass relationships with the people who do free. And then for those people who are paying a little something, there's going to be a little bit more customized services. Who are their channels? Flickr.com and Yahoo. Those are the people that own them. And then their customer segments. Casual users, they're using the free version, and then the high volume users who are willing to pay. So, what is their cost structure? So, they have to pay for developing and maintaining this platform and the storage cost, right? And then their revenue streams are going to come from the free limited basic account. So, there may be features on that free account that they may be able to upsell, and then from their pro accounts where there is a subscription fee. All right. So, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through this Amazon example, but I do want to take you back, because most of you are nonprofits. All right. So, suppose you are a nonprofit that is focusing on returning citizens. So, one of the value propositions would be you are reducing the rate of recidivism. That's the huge value. It's a value to the community because the community wants to be safer. It's a value to the families of the returning citizen because they want to be unified with the the returning citizen, but they want to make sure that when they do that unification, that they are ready to engage, right? So you are providing a value to the family, the community, you're providing a value to that returning citizen. You are helping that returning citizen restore him or herself to productivity to the community, right? You are providing value to funders because they're funders who have developed programs who want to make sure that they can help stem the tide on incarceration, but they don't necessarily have the same inroads into the community that you and I would have. So they would use your business, your nonprofit, in order to make inroads, right? So they're going to provide money to organizations who can actually do the hands on work with the ex offenders, right? So those are the various value propositions. There may be more. All right, so who might some of the key partners be? Your partners could be people who are working in housing, people who are working in workforce development, people who provide mentoring programs. Your key activities would be things like assessing who comes in, assessing the needs that each person has so that you can make sure you put them in contact with the folks who can help them. So another activity you will have is referrals. Other activities you will have would be mentoring. If your organization provides housing, that would be one of your activities. Some of the key resources, again, you're going to need staff, you're going to need buildings, you're going to need money. For example, some of the customer relationships, and those are going to be different based on the segments that you're talking about. In this case, you're going to be doing a lot of hands-on, because remember, the people that you're dealing with, they may not necessarily be quite as tech savvy as others. So you're going to have to make sure that you maintain your relationships in ways. I mean, yes, you're going to need a computer and a website. Yes, you're going to need social media, but you also need to be entrenched and on the ground so you can meet people physically where they are. So you're going to maintain relationships through other organizations. You're going to be meeting with folks, um, going to community meetings, et cetera, et cetera. The channels you use for communication, as well as the channels you use for quote unquote sales. All right, so the channels that you use for communication would be social media, websites, newspaper, channels for distribution. How do people actually um, get to your service? One channel could actually be registration online. It could be physical registration at a community meeting. All right. Who are your customer segments? Your customer segments will be your partners. It will be people who are actually, it could be returning citizens who are male, female, who are youth, justice involved youth. It could be your funders, it could be prospective partners, it could be employees. Again, your customers are people that work for you as well. You got to make sure you're doing what you need to do to maintain high quality employees, and same with board members. The cost structure. So you're going to take stock of how much it costs to enter into those relationships and maintain those relationships with partners, with your various clients, and maintain those distribution channels. And then you look at how you're going to bring in money. Your money will come in through grants, although we don't necessarily call grants revenue streams. By definition, revenue streams are those funds that come in as a direct result of um, producing a product or service. If you are a nonprofit, obviously, some of that money coming in will be from grants, but in an ideal sense, you want to get to a point where you are differentiating yourself from the market and you want to produce revenue other than or in addition to the grant. So revenue could come from, say, real estate development. It could come from also working with other groups. They could pay you fees for using your, they could pay you rental fees for using your premises. They could pay you fees for consulting, etc., etc. And again, I'm not going to go into the Amazon example because we are stretched for time. We're beyond our 1 hour. So I'm going to close out now. If you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to post. I see again that James Davis is here. Thank you so much. James is a member of the nonprofit Utopia community. He has been faithful. And James, for your faithful participation, we definitely will have a certificate waiting for you. All right. Any questions or comments before we go? All righty. So there are no questions or comments, I want to say thank you so much for your time. You didn't have to spend your time with me, but for some reason you did. So thank you very much. All right. Be sure to share this with others. You take care. Bye-bye. Before we go, if you're a member of the nonprofit Utopia community, we will have a members only session coming up on Wednesday where you can build upon your value proposition, build upon your business model, and then we'll take it to the next level where you can begin to test. Alrighty. So for members, I'll see you in person. Well, not in person. I'll see you on our platform members only session on Wednesday. And for the rest of us, next week, I shall see you again. All right. Take care. Bye bye.